Dear guests and participants, dear students and colleagues, welcome to this very special event on the International Mother Language Day 2022. We celebrate this day for the second time at Humboldt-University's Institute for Asian and African Studies. The first time was before the pandemic began in 2019. Actually, I'm not sure if celebrate is really the right word. Perhaps I should rather say we engage with the social, cultural, and political. This makes it a little bit easier for you to follow my introduction, I guess, but I only have one slide, so no worries. So we engage with the social, cultural, and political complexities surrounding linguistic diversity and multilingualism in Asia, Africa, and Europe. We're also interested in the relationship between linguistic diversity and multilingualism, as well as between linguistic practices and policies. At the global scale, we know that linguistic diversity is increasingly threatened. More and more languages disappear, and not only languages, but scripts disappear too. Just a few days ago, I had an interesting discussion with a group of students about the Kheti script, which had been widely used in North India, especially in Bihar, before a standardized Devanagari script became the central vehicle for Hindi. Due to this development, Kheti was increasingly marginalized and eventually forgotten in the 1950s. And this also meant that a lot of people, many of them belonging to less privileged groups, lost their script and would now be counted as illiterate, as they had never been taught the Nagari script that they were now expected to use. Riazul Haq, who organized and is going to chair the session on the politics of language and authoritarian nationalism, shared the following observation about his village in Bihar with me. This exclusion and extinction of Kheti not only crippled many people linguistically, but rendered them illiterate on paper. For example, I knew many people in my village who could read and write Kheti very well, but they would not be considered literate because they did not know Hindi or any other language when it came to writing. I'm very glad that one of the panels today is dedicated to the fascinating and often contested question of script. Focusing on the Mongolian language, Ganshimik Altangarel and her students Tanya Kapp and Gunnar Baum are going to shed light on the multiple meanings of its Cyrillic and classical script. We hardly know how many scripts are forgotten or about to disappear today, but we know that 40% of the global population do not have access to an education in a language they speak or understand. UNESCO nevertheless believes that progress is being made in mother tongue-based multilingual education, with growing understanding of its importance, particularly in early schooling, and more commitment to its development in public life. However, this seems to be mostly the case on specific local levels or in linguistically diverse cities and urban regions. Although reports often refer to countries or regions as a whole, especially when talking about Asia or Africa, they sometimes don't differentiate between the language infrastructures available in rural or urban contexts, or the dynamics of multilingualism in small or big cities. And this is exactly what Linda Gerlach and Christfried Naumann are going to discuss when they zoom in on multilingualism on the ground in Botswana today. United in diversity is the official motto of the European Union. The city of Brussels, which is the de facto capital of the EU, increasingly takes pride in its pronounced linguistic diversity. Rather than a mere coexistence of many languages, however, multilingualism as the ability of societies, institutions, groups, and individuals to engage with more than one language in their day-to-day lives is now seen as an asset and promoted as the gateway to inclusiveness as well as economic success in Brussels. The idea that fostering multilingualism in post-monolingual societies is key for the inclusion of culturally diverse groups, but also good for the economy, resonates with the UNESCO's perspective. As the German UNESCO Commission describes on its website, the organization assumes that linguistic diversity is key to building and sustaining inclusive, open, diverse, and participatory societies. Through languages, information and knowledge are transmitted, promoting prosperity, social change, and sustainable development. How come then that linguistic diversity is seen as beneficial for social inclusion and stability in some locations, and as a major challenge to social cohesion in others? For instance, in an article titled Papua New Guinea's Incredible Linguistic Diversity, published in The Economist, the author asks how locals in Papua New Guinea cope with so many languages. In fact, more than 850 languages spoken in the country of just 7.6 million, making it the most linguistically diverse place on Earth. As the verb to cope with indicates, too much diversity is seen as a problem that needs to be managed or even contained. Ever since Indonesia has invaded the West Papuan provinces in 1962, the extinction of indigenous languages has been closely linked to severe human rights violations. Together with Papuan musician, activist, and diplomat Ronny Kareni, Sydney Noemi Stein is going to discuss the question of forced linguistic and cultural assimilation and artistic forms of activism in West Papua's ongoing struggle for self-determination. I wonder if we are currently witnessing an increasing division between two paradigms: an emerging plurilingual paradigm on the one hand, and a prevailing monolingual paradigm on the other. We can observe the violent legacy of monolingualism and of the ideological relation between nation and language in almost all the contexts that our guest speakers, colleagues, and students are going to touch upon today. Interestingly, the Eritrean, Ethiopian, British writer Sulaiman Adonia chose the title "The Wounds of Multilingualism" on surrendering the languages of home for an essay in which he describes the painful loss of many languages, including his mother and father tongue, but also of languages that he learned but had to leave behind or let go during the many years that he spent in refugee camps in different countries. As a refugee minor who arrived in the UK only with his brother, he was not told that his knowledge of so many languages was something he could be proud of, and that would surely help him in life. Instead, he writes that the day of his arrival in the UK would also be the start of the surrender of his then strongest language, Arabic, in order to give way to English. When Adonia moved to multilingual Brussels in 2009, however, he was afraid of losing his English in the way he had lost all his other languages. The English language had allowed him to become a writer, to construct a home made of words, as he puts it. And I would like to quote from his essay. "I couldn't bear the thought of shedding off the English words I had worked so hard to acquire. The words that had allowed me to write, to construct a home made of words. I couldn't imagine opening my body to this repetitive cycle of loss and gain once again. I resisted learning French and Dutch, instead isolating myself with Silence is my mother tongue, the second novel I was working on, moving around the city at the heart of Europe like a hermit, with English like the moon in Neruda's poem, living in the lining of my skin, guiding me through those dark years. I am particularly happy that Hadis Yacoubi and Mehdi Dari are joining us from the island of Lesbos today. Together with Nagahan Uskam, who organized and is going to moderate their panel, they will share some of their deep insights and experiences of multilingual practices in a refugee camp with us. Saskia Schäfer and Leona Prepper are going to introduce us to the political vocabulary of Muslim feminists in Indonesia. Vicky Jansen, Mehmet Kesali, and Saskia Schäfer are going to shed light on the politics of exclusion and public debates on LGBTIQ+ people in Indonesia and Turkey. Jansen Joseph will talk about language nationalisms and cinema in South India. Last but not least, we have 3 sessions that will draw our attention to the sonic dimensions of language and to the relation of language and music. In the session, What's in a Sound, organized and shared by Alexa Altman, students will showcase their experimental projects and reflections on the intersection of sound studies and social linguistics. Alexa has created a website specifically for this multimedia exhibition, which will be accessible online after its launch today. Together with another group of students, Fritzi Marie Tietzmann and Monika Freier are going to introduce us to different genres and examples of viral poetry in the context of protest movements in India, and these will be performed by the students too. Finally, we are grateful to Esi Hanstein, who invited renowned violinist Iskandar Widjaja to our event today. He will perform Indonesia Pusaka on his violin, a song which is usually performed on festive occasions of Indonesia's Independence Day and sung by a big chorus. I would like to thank everyone for their contributions to this event, and I look forward to all the presentations and discussions. A big thanks goes to our student assistant, Lara Kauter, for her support, humor, and creativity. Lara also designed the wonderful poster and flyer for this program. This event is organized in the framework of the research project Beyond Social Cohesion, Global Repertoires of Living Together, better known as REPLITO, and it is funded by the Berlin University Alliance. Thank you very much for joining us today. I wish us all an inspiring and interesting Mother Language Day at IAAW.